What's up, brand builders? Stephen Hurahan here on the Brandmaster podcast, and in this episode, I'm joined by Professor Dan Wallace, co-author of The Physics of Brand, marketing professor and longtime strategist who's helped shape some of the most respected brands in the world. Now, Dan has worked across ad agencies, design firms, and academia as well, and he brings a rare blend of experience and clarity when it comes to how brands actually work in the real world and in the human brain. We dug into the fascinating science behind brand physics, how brands live in the emotional and reptilian parts of the brain, and what that really means for how they're remembered, valued, and chosen as well. And in this episode, we unpack how brand value is actually created and measured, the biggest threats to brands today, and the role of internal culture and how that shapes external perception. So if you want to understand the laws of brand physics and how to build a brand that pulls people in and sticks at a subconscious level, then don't miss this episode of the Brandmaster Podcast. Welcome to the Brandmaster Podcast, a show specialized in helping branding professionals and entrepreneurs build brands using strategy, psychology, and creative thinking. Hello everyone and welcome to the Brandmaster Podcast, and I'm absolutely delighted to have on the show with me today Dan Wallace, the co-author of The Physics of Brand. Dan, I'm really delighted that you've joined us today. Really excited to get stuck into a conversation about this very interesting topic. Thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Glad to be here, Stephen. Thank you for the invite.
Now, just quickly, in going through your book and looking at some of the names who have reviewed your book and spoken so highly of your book, it really speaks to the impact that the book has made in the market. Tell me a little bit about your background as to how you got to where you are, and to have such an interest in such a topic that we're all passionate about.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a long journey. The journey is more than 40 years at this point in time. So it started at Arizona State. I got a degree in marketing, and I had with a specialization in advertising. I had three great professors there. Dr. Beltramini, Dr. Stevens, and also Vince Blasco. They really set me up to get in the ad world. And I was lucky to come back to Minneapolis, and I got a job working on the Wall Street Journal account at what was then Fallon McElligott Rice. It was the ad agency of the year at that point in time. And in the agency at that point in time, one of the account people had David Ocker's book, Building Strong Brands.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd heard a lot about advertising, but in school they never talked about brands.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a new idea actually at the agency at that point in time. The whole concept of brands was new. What was popular at that point in time was positioning by Trout and Rice.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I saw those things fitting together. I did read Ocker's book. It was early theory in branding. I thought it was interesting, but also kind of loosely held together. And
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to figure out, is there a better theory for this? So roll forward to about the year 2000. I went to hear Aaron Keller, who is the principal of Capsule, which is a global brand naming design firm. Now they do special projects, all types of things. They work for Patagonia and all kinds of around the world. I heard him speak, and I was like, wow, this guy is really bright and interesting. And he works on the design side. I came from the advertising side. And I looked him up and I said, hey, let's go have a beer. And so it ended up being 3 beers. And we had a long and deep conversation about brands from these two perspectives. And somewhere during the 3rd beer, we came up with this idea that a brand is the result of the interactions with people across space and time. So, we're like, wow, that's a great idea. So the next day, I called him up and I said, was that the beer or was that really a good idea? We were not sure. And for several years, we weren't sure. We're like, well, it seems interesting, but we weren't sure. So then Aaron one day went to an accounting meeting and ran into a woman named Renee Marino, who did court cases on trademark litigation. And on top of that, she used to do the math for missile science before she was an
Wow.
accountant. Super bright person. And her father was a physicist. And so she said, that's a great idea. I'll work with you guys on it. And so suddenly we got validated that it wasn't just beer. And we worked with Renee for several years on this concept. And frankly, we still couldn't quite figure out exactly what the idea meant. But we sent out a proposal to 7 different publishers to see if someone would give us a book deal. And only one did, but it was Simon and Schuster. And so we got a good publisher. And then we spent one summer figuring out what it meant. So that's the birth story of the
Yeah,
book.
I love that. Some of the worst decisions of all time and the best decisions of all time have been made after 3 beers, and it's good to hear that the what you guys came up with after 3 beers actually grew legs and brought the concept of brand into such an interesting space. Now, at this point in time in our conversation, we haven't yet solidified the concept for the listeners as to what the physics of brand is. So, in its most simplistic form, break down for me how we can look at brands through the lens of physics.
Yes. So a foundational truth of physics is that we live in time and space.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the few undisputable realities. Okay. But we're biological creatures, right? We live in time and space, but we are not time and space.
Mm-hmm.
So really, what we're looking at is the interaction between humans and time and space. So, one of the principles in the book is that what goes on in our brain comes through our senses, our sensory interfaces, through signals that are out there in the world. So
Mm-hmm.
there's all these signals, and our senses pull them into our brains, and they create moments in time. And then some mysterious way, those moments in time, turn into memories. And, that's a pretty mysterious thing. And we do know that, and one of the interesting insights that we gathered from the book is that really brands live in neural connections inside of people's brains, and they live and die in those based on the signals that come in, people's sensory perceptions.
And that's
And
why it's called
so,
a battle for the mind.
exactly, exactly. And one thing that's interesting too is the mind is kind of a different thing from the brain. The mind is our subjective experience, and the brain is this objective thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the interface between those two is kind of unknown. But then that leads to something we call energy.
Mm-hmm.
That all those neural connections and this mysterious aspect of mind and consciousness create this energy. And then when we interact in the world, that energy could lead us to buy something. It could
Mm-hmm.
lead to sales, and then that could lead to profit, and that could lead to value. And so that model I just went through was really something that Renee was instrumental in that, she wanted to have a model for her court cases to explain how do brands work with people. So that's one of our models is that one. But then the other model is to just look at time and space. Okay, so that's where all the signals come from, right? From time
Mm-hmm.
and space. So the first moment in time is a significant one for the brand. The moment that brand launches. So brand launches are really important.
Mm-hmm.
How they go about that. Like you think of when Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone. What a masterful launch
Mm-hmm.
that was. And then there's the massive time that people spend with a brand. And so if people are spending a lot of time with the brand, that means that those they have memories and they're out there doing things, they're engaging with it. So it's a big signal of what the brand is doing inside of people's minds, inside of people's brains. And then the third thing in terms of time is the velocity of those engagements over time. Are people spending more time as time goes on or less time as time goes on? So
Mm.
you look at, for example, Sears, for many, many years in America, Sears, people spend tons of time, multi-sensory time, in their stores, and then it just declined. And now there's like 11 stores left.
Hmm.
So that's the time dimension. In terms of the space dimension, there's the individual person. There's you and I, and your listeners. And then there's also the community we live in. We're social creatures, social beings. There's the brand owner and what they do. But in addition to that, in space, there's brand handlers. PR, the press, social media, distribution, supply chains, all of those types of things. So, those are the three primary models that we have in the book, and it took us a long time to wrestle that to the ground.
Yeah, and I love to hear fresh perspectives on our world, because one of the aspects that I've really adopted is the idea of the human brand as well, and that brings in, the science and psychology behind why we do what we do, and it just gives us another lens to really understand brand, because it's such a fluffy concept, and it means so many different things to so many different people, as you know by experience, one on the ad side, one on the design side, and in the middle you come up with this great concept. So I know we'll have a chance to dig into where people can get the book, but if you haven't got your hands on the book, The Physics of Brand, I definitely recommend getting your hands on it, because it really does give a fresh perspective to the concept. And if you're talking to clients or leaders about brands, it helps them to understand it from a different lens as well. So definitely take a look at that. In terms of you yourself, Dan, and what brought you all of your experiences to the point where you were sitting in that bar, who were the mentors that kind of influenced you along your journey and shaped how you thought about brands?
Great question. Yeah, I mean, none of us build ideas on our own,
Yeah, we
and
stand on the shoulder of giants.
we absolutely do. So, positioning by Trout and Rise, the
Mm-hmm.
by Acker. Um, David's daughter, Jennifer Acker,
Mm-hmm.
also wrote a paper on brand personality. You're probably familiar with that.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that's really influential because it's based on the big five personality factors. And when I
Mm-hmm.
was in brand consulting, I used to use that work a lot because
Mm-hmm.
pretty easy lever to just switch the personality, particularly, for example, B2B firms, which are also almost always competent. If you move them to sophisticated or exciting, suddenly, they stand out and are
Mm-hmm.
different. So I really liked her work. Very lucky to live in Minneapolis because, like Australia, where you lived at one point in time, Minneapolis is kind of a hotbed of marketing and brand theory.
Mm-hmm.
And early on, there was a brand strategist in town, Karl Speak, who actually would be worth interviewing on this show. He came up with a book called Be Your Own Brand, which is an excellent model on personal branding. Are you familiar with Karl's book?
No, I'm not. But now I'm intrigued. Beer on brand. It's
Be Your Own Brand, Karl Speak. And so that was great too, because it kind of, we're like, wow, you can come up with a theory, a new idea, and you can create a book about it. And he sold
Mhm.
100,000 of these books. So
Wow.
that's a big, big sale. But the biggest influences were two theorists in Minneapolis that really we built this model on. And that was Lou Carbone, who was the first experience consultancy in the world, experience engineering. And Lou wrote a book called Clued In. And basically, his belief was that all marketing is based on customer experience, And customer experience has three different elements. He didn't use these words, but this is my interpretation. Those elements are the physical environment that people operate within, the social environment that people operate in, and the value that they're receiving through the offering. So a real
Mhm.
clean model. Aaron and I talked about that where we really liked that model. And then the other Minnesotan who huge influence in marketing and in customer experience is Joe Pine, the experience economy.
Mhm.
And he sold over 350,000 books. He just did
Mm.
his 25th anniversary edition. And Joe came up with this model and this realization that we've moved way beyond the world of manufactured products, and that and then he went and looked at, well, what is the evolution of products over time? And so the way he did it is, first it starts out with commodities, things that come from nature,
Mhm.
and then we move to this industrial era where those things were manufactured in factories into goods, into things. But then after that, move to services. So, if you go to a restaurant, that's a service. Services are 70% of the US economy now. So we're well beyond the world of goods. And then his big insight was that there's this whole new category of what people buy, and that is experiences. So if you go
Mhm.
to an amusement park or Disneyland or something like that, that's an experience. And what's interesting is we buy goods and services to save time, but we spend money to spend time and experiences. It's a
Mm.
really interesting twist that Joe came up with. And then he also has a new one, a higher level, which is transformations. So, like your podcast is a transformational
Mhm.
thing, helping people think in new ways. So between the Acres, Lou Carbone, Joe Pine, by the time Aaron and I had our beers, we were well informed.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And you know, David Acker is someone that I've had on the show as well. He's still going strong after all these years. His daughter Jennifer, I've been speaking with her about having her on the show. We've never managed to align our diaries. It's something that we continue to try and come back to. Um, and clearly all of and what's so interesting to me is how many different perspectives there are. And when I hear something, whether it be Beer on Mind or the experience economy, and I hear the concepts, I can relate to them, but from a different perspective. And 100% what you said about the evolution to experiences and transformation, and that's the evolution of brands, and the concept of brand is something that I talk about quite often. And your work on the physics of brand, and all these different perspectives give us a different lens to look through and a different tool to use depending on who our client is, depending on who we're talking to, and depending on who we're trying to help understand the concept of brand. So all of these influencers to get you to where you are, they're also influencing me. I'm speaking with hundreds, and it's just this great soup of different perspectives, and it's kind of what I love about what we do is that there's no black and white. It's all different lenses and different perspectives, and that's something that I love. You talk a lot about brand value. Um, so talk to me about your concept of brand value and the biggest threats to brand value today.
You bring up a great one. Well, I'll just do a little segue first. So, Aaron Keller and I have a new book that we're working on with Mary Meehan. Aaron runs Capsule, and Mary, she's an ethnographic researcher. Amazing career, done all kinds of interesting things. And the book we're working on is going to explore the relationship between personal values and what people value in the world. And
Hmm.
so it's deep territory. We're just starting. Frankly, we're a little bit lost at this point in time. We're reading books and trying to figure it out.
They're
So
the conversations that I love digging deep into and exploring different concepts. Anyway, I digress. Please continue.
So anyway, these ideas about value are a bit half-baked at this point in time. So just let me state that. So you know, I for 4 years I taught full time as a professor in the University of Wisconsin in La Crosse, and we use this model of value as value equals utility over price, so that the denominator of everything is price, that all decisions are made through the lens of price. And then this concept of utility is what makes us decide something's valuable. That never quite set well with me. I thought it was
Mhm.
too narrow. And you know, one of the things too is, can you define utility really well? And so that this is an economics model, by the way. And
Mhm.
so the economists defined utility as the right item in the right place, in the right form, in the right time, in the right place for the right price. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, technically that kind of makes some sense, but you know, we're emotional creatures by nature. And it just seems like all of that has been stripped out. And, you know, like what motivates people to do things is a huge issue. I mean, you know, we buy all kinds of things that have no practical utility. Uh,
Mhm.
so anyway, that bothered me. I went out and met with Aaron and said, I'd like to figure this out. And so you know, my best guess right now is that where does value come from? That value comes from minerals, plants, and animals. That's at this foundational level. And then people on top of that. And this could involve the labor of people and the ideas of people. And then machines and computers. Um, so is that right? I don't know. I haven't tested it. I'd
Yeah,
love to get your thoughts.
yeah. So I totally agree with what you said before. Utility is the right product in the right place at the right time at the right price, and that strips out all of the emotional aspect to it, because when you think about it, so many of our purchasing decisions, especially in relation to brand, discount all of those because we're chasing something else. We're chasing the social value it gives us, how it makes us feel about ourselves, uh, rather than the usefulness of something. Yes, it can help us to overcome a problem. And this comes back to the idea of experience and transformation. But what does that journey look like? The utility and the usefulness, yes, that can help us solve a problem. But when you combine the experience and the transformation and the emotions that we feel along the way to get to the final destination, they're two concepts, or probably a few more when you dig into it, that can segue to that final destination, that are really important in how we perceive value. So they're interesting concepts to dig into. So I like what you said about questioning the utility aspect of it, because it strips out that emotion. And when it comes to brand, that's what we talk so much about, because it is so emotionally driven, and that's how we make so many of our decisions. It sounds like a question I'm putting to you as an interviewer, but it's really just my musings on what you said, and I think it's very, very interesting the road that you guys are going down, and I can't wait to see what you come out with on the other side. Um, in terms of how you think brand value should be measured, and of course you said this is a fluffy thought. What are the missing pieces there for you, and how close are you to getting to where you are? What's the biggest challenge that's standing in your way at the moment, do you think?
There's so many. So first of all, how are values formed within people?
Mm,
And so Mary Meehan, her belief, which she's convinced us of, is that ultimately values determine what we value.
mhm,
And So, well, where do values come from? To what extent is it biological? How much of it's social? How much of it is personal? How much of it's philosophical? What parts of it might be religious? There are so many different aspects of that. Um, and and then on one second, I got to stop my phone.
Okay.
um, so um, yeah, so we're in deep water,
Hmm.
and we don't have a clear answer. We're reading all kinds of books. I'm plowing my way through Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith right now, which is,
I, don't- I think that's the challenge that you come across when we try to quantify something. When we start to use mathematics and physics to categorize things and put things into places, and then you season it all with human emotions, and it throws everything out of alignment, and there's so much more to consider. But it's really something that when you're trying to make sense of it, if you're able to compartmentalize things and put everything in the boxes that they belong, and you can kind of see that visually, everything just kind of falls into place. I'm confident that you guys will get there, but where you're digging at the moment does sound like deep water indeed. If you if you do have anything that you're stuck on and you want to chew over, I'd love to hear the challenge that you're going through. In terms of the insights that you've gained from you, because obviously you've been there as a professor, and in teaching what you do as a discipline, the learning kind of sinks in another level. What insights have you gained in the role specifically as a professor in the university?
well, actually, my background in marketing communications have helped a lot. Is stories and emotional content helps memory, more than anything. So that's one. The other is that having students engage together, also helps. So yeah, that's really been the biggest thing. Unfortunately, there's kind of a tendency in universities to think that if students remember answers on exams, that is an indicator that they know what they need to know. But I think that skills and experiences are more significant than
Mm,
that. And so, what I try and do is I try to help build skills of working with these concepts and experiences. And the other thing too, Stephen, you talked about these frameworks, and I think like the framework we have in the physics of brand. I'm proud of it. It's interesting, but it's not fully explanatory.
mhm.
It's just one lens of looking at things, and there's all these other lenses as well. And I think that academia would be better if it kind of treated it like that, where
Mm.
rather than this is the absolute truth in all
Yeah,
situations.
yeah, I completely agree with that.
And the other thing too is when I was in college, I used to frame houses, and so framing a house is complicated. Everything works in a specific way and has to work only in one way. Marketing's complex. It's constantly moving, it's constantly changing. And so it's such a different world
Mhm.
than than a lot of businesses and the way people think. But it's fun to be with students. I'm going to be with them this afternoon. I'm doing two classes adjunct at the Carlson School at the University of Minnesota, and so it is fun to be back in the classroom with students again. It's great to hear the questions they have, and their energy and excitement.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. In terms of, and we spoke a lot about uh, evolution before, and your mention of the experience economy as well, and how that's evolved over time, and that's been part of your studies as well. When we when we look back, we can see the evolution, but when you look forward, what way do you see brands evolving? I mean, obviously, with the introduction of AI, it's difficult to project the next 2 to 3 years, let alone 10 years. But what can you see for brands in the future in terms of evolution, where we're going?
That prediction about the future is hard, but I'll just give you I'll give you some thoughts, some signals. In the United States, in my mind, the two most interesting brands are Costco and Amazon. I don't, do they have Costco in France?
They don't have Costco, but I'm very well aware of Costco.
Yeah. So Costco is a warehouse with cement floors, no windows, Klieg lights over on top. It has a weird name, Costco. Why would you put cost into a name? You have to pay, get a card to go in to the place. And then once you go in there, they don't give you choice. It's just like, here's the one thing that you can get, and you have to buy a huge quantity of it. So on the face of it, it's a weird business model. And on top of that, they don't advertise at all. They spend nothing on advertising. Yet it's tremendously profitable. So I think it's an example of like extreme value. The thing that's great about Costco is when you go in, and Costco is my happy place. I love it. And it's um, you go in there and you can be assured that anything you buy is going to be at least half off.
Mm,
Um, and it's all going to be good because their quality standards are so high. So you don't have to think. You just have to go in there with your giant oversized cart and put stuff in it. And so Costco is a brand without advertising and with bad aesthetics. Amazon is the opposite. They have an overwhelming amount of things. I've heard like 800 million different things you can get on
hmm
Amazon. And it's no place at all.
mm,
It doesn't exist. And interesting in the US, in Consumer Reports, these are the top two retailers year
mm,
after year. One is a warehouse and the other isn't a place. And meanwhile, malls are collapsing all over and,
mm.
retail is struggling. So, um, it's just interesting to see. And to some extent, my brand then is Costco. And while whatever Costco puts in there is the brand I like because I
Mm,
trust.
mm.
And with Amazon, the reviews, are huge. And if you read them, you can make good decisions. So so yeah, I don't know. I think we're going to enter into a very new era of brands. Um, yeah, AI. I mean, social media has really disrupted brands. I mean, back when I was, early on in advertising in the 1980s, I mean, you could reliably reach pretty much everybody in America through television, newspapers, and magazines and
Mm,
billboards. You can't now.
mhm,
Um, and so, I mean, one of the things I believe is that brand value, the value that the brand itself brings to the customer is going to be the most important thing, more important than communication, that the brand and the word of mouth, the product or service itself, and the word of mouth that comes from that is going to be important. And so that'd be my guess. But wow, things are changing. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, massively. And of course, when you look at the likes of Amazon, it and Costco, it really comes back to the earlier debate about value with Amazon. It's convenience. How I ordered a $1,000 camera on Amazon a few weeks ago, and it was here in less than 24 hours, and that scared the life out of me. Like, how no wonder people are addicted to shopping. And then Costco, they don't need to advertise, they don't need to brand, because the discounted value that they offer, people know going through the door when they walk out, they're getting value, and there's trust that's earned with that. In terms of, now, these are obviously massive brands with you know, mass marketing and huge budgets. As you said, Costco don't advertise, but they're giant brands. In terms of smaller brands and brands entering the market, do you see room there? Because with what I'm noticing with the change of AI and what I believe will happen in the future is that we'll find a nostalgia for human connection that we're probably going to lose more and more as we move forward. What role do you see smaller brands, more boutique brands playing as we move into the future?
That is such a great question. I'd love to get your thoughts to it. I mean, one thing I will say is that between social media, COVID, the loss of shopping centers, the loss of religion, things like that, human connection has really declined.
Mm,
And we are social creatures. And I think that is a huge problem and a huge opportunity for brands
hmm
in many respects. Um, and I do see uh, kind of signs of things that could happen with that. And I'll just give you a few outliers. So Minnesota is one of the coldest places in America, and it's the middle of winter right now. It's 2 below currently, and so in the past, Minnesotans their hobby, many of them, was to go out and ice fish and drink aquavit, and these days that's less popular. But apparently, this is a world center of board game playing and board game design, and also pinball playing. And there's a bar about 10 blocks from here that just has pinball machines. And people go in there and do play old school pinball and things like that. So, I would vote that, there is a need for ways to bring people together.
mm,
And that I think and that is hard to do on a mass scale.
mm,
Um, but I think there's big opportunities in that world. Um, I think for experiences, I think that there are experiences for niche education and niche transformational experiences. And I don't know if you've read about this, but the Silicon Valley elite, it's really popular for them to go and take ayahuasca in the Amazon. Have you heard about
yes,
this?
yes.
So I think that there will be opportunities for niche brands that work on the human level. Um, but in terms of, what we've experienced in the past of shopping centers and kind of like mass consumerism, I don't know. I think that, it's going to be hard to compete with Costco and Amazon, you
Mm.
know, and
And yeah, and like I think that's it. If you play that game and you compete on that level, you're always going to lose. And I think as we move forward, and this is why our discipline is so interesting because it's fluid and it's always changing, and the problems of tomorrow are going to be different to the problems of today. And I think there's certainly the human experience is something that we're we're starved of more and more as when we compare to what life was like in the 80s or the 90s. We can already feel that starvation, and we're going to be more and more deprived of it as we move into the future. And I think it's really just a case of adapting to the conditions at the time and asking where are the opportunities. And I suppose that's always been the case with brands and marketing, hasn't it?
it has. Well, I tell my students that human problems are marketing opportunities.
Mm,
You know so these issues, but yeah, I think one of the big human problems right now is human connection.
mm.
It is a really big one. Um, you know, other than, well, like geopolitics, global warming. I mean, there's a whole other long
Yeah,
list.
that's another rabbit hole for another problem for other people. And I think if our listeners are able to to take something forward from this, and this is what I'm taking forward from it, is that our world is about perspectives, different opinions, and the lenses with which we look through our industry. And if you're able to take a fresh perspective on that and help other people understand it, or help yourself understand it, you'll be better for it. Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. I know that you have a date with a pinball machine placed 10 blocks down the road at some stage this afternoon, no doubt. Where can people find out more about your books, The Physics of Brand, and your upcoming book? Or where can people best get in touch with you?
Physics of Brand, I mean, Amazon's the easiest place to get it. And
Of course, Costco if you want 50 of them.
yeah, that's right. And I'm pretty sure it's distributed worldwide. We're still getting royalty checks, almost 10 years later. So I think that's a good place. Or your local bookstore, would be good too. It's good to support them. Your listeners are if they want, they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with people who are interested in brands. And I really admire what you're doing. And this is really a fun conversation. And I hope you have a good day there in France.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. As I said, it's been an absolute pleasure. I love having conversations to this level. It doesn't happen as often as I would like, and I'm very, very privileged with my podcast to be able to speak to experts at your caliber. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today. And I hope to speak to you again in the future. No doubt when your next book comes out, it'll be another opportunity for us to catch up. And I'll be more than happy to do that with you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Dan. I want to take a second to show some appreciation. I appreciate every single one of our listeners, but I have a soft spot for listeners who share the love. A shout out to Caitlin Kurlik from the US, the best of the best in brand strategy. I've been following the Brandmaster Academy for a while, and I've always found the content packed with invaluable education, insights, and tips. I love that this is free and accessible so that I'm able to learn and grow as a strategist and business owner. It has definitely been a godsend. Caitlin, thank you so much for your review. I thoroughly appreciate it. If you want to share the love and possibly get a shout out on the podcast, please take a couple of minutes to leave a review on your favorite platform. We really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you want to learn more brand strategy techniques to level up your skills, make sure you check out brandmasteracademy.com. There's plenty of free resources and premium content for you to download and get you going. If you'd like to join our Facebook group full of like-minded brand strategists, all learning from each other, then find us by searching for the Brand Strategy Community, where you can find exclusive content for members as well. If you enjoyed this content, please be sure to give us an honest review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listened, and make sure you tune in for the next episode of the Brandmaster Podcast.